Chapter 1, an overview of ethics. This is part 2 of 2, ethics in organizations. The learning outcomes include: explain why business ethics is becoming increasingly important, analyze what organizations are doing to improve their business ethics, summarize why organizations are interested in fostering good business ethics, evaluate approaches to improve ethical decision-making, and explore trends that have increased the risk of using information technology in unethical ways. Many organizations have begun to adopt policies of corporate social responsibility, or CSR, which we mentioned in Part 1. With policies in place to foster corporate social responsibility, organizations assume ownership for their actions. Possible outcomes include environmental problems. For instance, when the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig malfunctioned, resulting in 11 lost lives and massive amounts of oil released into the Gulf of Mexico. Organizations also try to consider how their actions will affect the community. For instance, the impact on traffic patterns and congestion when building a new outlet mall. Finally, organizations take responsibility for how their actions affect employees. For instance, when consolidating offices and downsizing, or when considering whether to go offshore with IT projects. Supply chain sustainability is related to corporate social responsibility, but it extends the organization's responsibility to everyone involved in the supply chain. Manufacturers and auditors and distributors and retailers, for instance. This concept refers to developing and maintaining a supply chain that is sensitive to impacts of actions on the environment, the community, and employee welfare. In other words, today's supply chain meets our needs, but we are not damaging the environment, the community, or our employees in terms of long-term viability. We do our part for the environment, establish a sense of mutually beneficial community goodwill, and ensure that our employees are trained properly and compensated fairly for the work that they do. For more information, you can take a look at this YouTube video on corporate social responsibility. Why do organizations even care about developing, maintaining, and reviewing their corporate social responsibility policies? It's not all selfless altruism. Companies still have to make money or collect donations or provide services in order to meet the needs of their stakeholders. Generally, organizations do want to acquire and maintain community goodwill, and the only way they can do that is through policies that have a noticeable impact on the surrounding communities. For instance, Kroger and Publix both actively contribute to local K-12 schools in the area, and they make sure that people in the community are aware of their contributions. It's a win-win for both. Second, organizations need to have consistent, reliable operations so that they meet the needs of the stakeholders. Organizations need to set reasonable targets and reasonable time estimates and inform stakeholders regularly. Employees should also be considered important stakeholders in the successful operation of the company, and they should be treated fairly. Third, organizations need to develop, maintain, and follow good business practices. Not only does this allow the organization to keep their community goodwill, it also allows them to remain on the right side of ethical guidelines and professional ethics. A good code of ethics helps achieve this goal, but commitment at all levels is necessary to maintain good business practices throughout the supply chain. Fourth, organizations need to follow corporate social responsibility policies to protect themselves and their employees from legal action. Nuclear plants must follow governmental guidelines, or the impact could be substantial from a business and societal level. C-level employees who inaccurately report earnings figures may be liable for civil and criminal penalties under laws such as Sarbanes-Oxley, which we will discuss later. Finally, no company wants to have bad publicity. People remember when the organization makes a mistake, and mistakes will reach the news media. It's too easy for Johnny on the street to post a video to Facebook Live, and all of a sudden, everybody sees your mistake and you receive bad publicity. The bad publicity may cause you to lose customers, lose contracts, and even go out of business. Data breaches at the Home Depot, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Target, and many others show up on the news every day. Of course, I have almost come to accept data breaches as part of having credit cards. I assume that the company will protect me if my data is used inappropriately or if large purchases are made in my name. I'm not sure that's always a good assumption, however. All of these reasons together show why organizations should set up policies of corporate social responsibility, follow professional ethical guidelines, and obey all appropriate regulations and laws. It pays off in the long term. Part of a corporate social responsibility policy is ensuring that employees and partners all follow ethical standards. One way to do that is through the development of successful ethics programs at the organization level. Employees must be willing to seek advice if they believe an ethical infraction has occurred. There must be no negative repercussions for those who report ethical violations, or people will stop reporting those issues. Through proper training, employees feel equipped to handle ethically challenging situations that could lead to violations. Requiring periodic ethics training is one way to ensure that employees follow ethical guidelines. For instance, at KSU, I go through ethics training at least once a year since I have access to confidential student data and information. I cannot release any grades or other educational records to anyone besides a student unless a student provides permission in writing. Similarly, I can't even release student email addresses or other protected data as defined by KSU and the state and federal government. Obviously, KSU does not want to violate these federal rules, so they are advised to keep me and all others with access to student data well trained. Similarly, organizations should not reward employees for achieving goals through unethical or immoral methods. If an unethical action results in organizational rewards through increased sales, for instance, the employee should be disciplined and given remedial training, or the employee may need to be terminated. Companies that award employees who achieve success through less than ethical methods will see other employees seeking rewards in the same manner. Employees who work at organizations that value and reward ethical behavior tend to have a more positive attitude toward their company. This positive attitude is contagious and spills over to their friends and contacts and others in the organization. Ethical companies tend to have happier employees, and that's a good thing. A corporate ethics officer or equivalent C-level manager is one way to try to achieve corporate social responsibility with employees who behave ethically across situations and who feel comfortable reporting violations. The corporate ethics officer provides the vision and leadership needed to maintain the ethical environment. The corporate ethics officer can also translate how business ethics and corporate social responsibility translate to business goals and strategies. This person should report directly to the CEO, demonstrating the importance of ethics in the organization. A C-level executive in charge of ethics may be a corporate compliance officer. The name isn't really as important as the designation of someone in the organization to take on this role. Responsibilities of this person include ensuring compliance with all ethical guidelines as established by the industry, the organization, the community, and government and regulatory agencies. In addition, the C-level manager must ensure that the ethical culture established in the organization stresses the value and importance of ethics in the organization. And finally, the corporate ethics officer is a one-stop shopping point of contact for ethics issues, so everyone knows where to report potential violations. You may want to look at this YouTube video that describes the role of an ethics officer in the organization. Ethical standards in an organization are set by the highest ruling group, often board of directors, along with the C-level employees in the organization. If top levels disregard ethical standards, the rank and file will likely behave in similar manners. First, the organization and all its members must have the highest standards of personal and professional integrity. They should be trusted to act similarly when encountering ethical dilemmas, no matter who might be watching. Second, top managers must create an environment where employees are encouraged to report ethical issues, seek advice, and report misconduct without fear of reprisal. Third, top management must follow all relevant laws and regulations. These regulations will vary depending on industry, and top management must be aware of and comply with relevant regulations. In many cases, organizations may choose to have internal regulations that are even more stringent than required by law. Finally, top managers set the standard for how everyone within the company should behave. If top management does not follow consistent, stated ethical standards, then it's unlikely for anyone else to follow. An organization will find it difficult to set ethical standards without developing a corporate code of ethics. A code of ethics describes key issues that employees may encounter. For instance, organizations that operate globally have to carefully consider how to handle countries where bribery is considered the norm to accomplish goals. How do they effectively work in the country without violating ethical standards, U.S. laws, and international laws? Some locations in Eastern Europe, South America, and Africa use bribes to accomplish routinized activities. Partnering with local organizations may present an opportunity for foreign locations. The Code of Ethics also highlights the overarching values and principles that are important to the organization, codifying them in writing and rewarding those who follow the guidelines in performance evaluations. This Code of Ethics must apply to everyone in the organization, including directors, officers, and employees. Again, if the top executives fail to follow ethical guidelines, it will filter down to the rank and file. A particular focus on employees who may encounter ethical situations is essential. Customer-facing personnel, including salespeople, account managers, and the like, for instance, are likely to encounter ethical challenges when interacting with diverse customers. Similarly, professors and others with access to educational or financial records should be properly trained and reminded often of their ethical obligations. Overall, the Code of Ethics should encourage employees to behave in open and honest ways, being accountable for their ethical actions, and directly rewarded or punished for how they handle ethical situations. Together, these values help foster an honest and accountable company culture, one that is open in its actions and rewarding of employees who follow ethical standards. You may have heard of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX, which was passed in 2002. SOX was a bipartisan effort to hold senior management accountable for the integrity of the organization's financial data and internal controls. CEOs and CFOs, for instance, may face up to 20 years in prison and high fines for falsely certifying corporate financial reports and reports on internal controls. SOX was created in response to several well-known scandals such as Enron. Details about that case are shown in the YouTube video here. If you haven't seen the movie, The Smartest Guys in the Room, it's a good account of what happened. Enron raided employee retirement accounts and, together with its auditor, Arthur Andersen, showed profits that were inaccurate. As they ran out of funds, senior executives began to sell their stock and then used retirement funds to bolster the company's images. Employees lost that money, and since there was nothing left to recover, they could not even sue for damages. If you happen to be an older employee with all of your retirement invested in Enron stock, which was required, you were out of luck. As a result of the actions of Enron and others, SOX was passed. One of the relevant portions of the law is Section 404, which states that CEOs and CFOs and COOs and other C-level executives are liable for certifying that the reports presented are accurate. In response, most organizations built in multi-level certification protocols where lower-level employees certify the information that they present. Their managers certify the information, and all the way to the top. In that way, C-level executives insulate themselves against legal repercussions. Otherwise, they argue, they would have no way to know if the inventory figures for a particular quarter were correct. Think about a large bureaucracy with multiple layers. Although the C-level executive is ultimately responsible for what is reported, there is no way that she or he will know the specifics about every aspect of the company. Thus, to date, few executives have been prosecuted under SOX. Another relevant portion of SOX is Section 406, which states that public companies must inform the public whether they have a code of ethics and if there are any waivers of the code. For instance, they may waive the code for their organizations operating in countries where bribery is common. Waiving the code for any portion of the organization is asking for legal trouble and closer scrutiny. Still, the chance of being prosecuted under SOX rules have to date been slim. Let's take a closer look at Code of Ethics requirements under SOX. The code must apply to all employees equally, including senior managers, the board of directors, C-level employees, and rank-and-file employees. If different standards are used for different levels of the organization, again, people will likely be skeptical that the organization truly values ethical interactions. If the top leadership does not adhere to the code, it is unlikely that others will display the ethical behaviors that are desired. If employees are excluded from development of the code, it is unlikely that they will understand and follow the code. Employee buy-in and top management commitment are both important determinants of the success of the organizational code of ethics. The code must be known by employees who receive regular training on its components, and the code should be accessible to shareholders, business partners, and the public. Codes of ethics must be consistently applied to the organization's decision-making and be implemented into the culture of the company. Recently, organizations have begun to complete social audits. With this concept, the organization reviews its ethical and social responsibility goals and ensures that employees, shareholders, and the public are aware of the objectives for the next year. Also included in ethical and social responsibility goals are consultants who complete market analysis summaries for potential buyers of company stock, relevant government agencies, and the general public in communities where the company operates. Regular training for all employees is an important part of a commitment to organizational ethics. Training should show examples of inappropriate behavior and how to respond using the company's code of ethics. Training should further demonstrate how employees should act ethically when faced with real-world challenges. This regular training demonstrates the organization's commitment to enforcing the code of ethics. Goals of ethics training include encouraging employees to report misconduct to supervisors and/or appropriate offices as outlined in the Code of Conduct, explicitly demonstrating how employees can report potential violations, reassuring employees that reports of ethical violations will be seriously considered and investigated, and further assure employees that they won't face retaliation for their honest reports of potential ethical violations. You may want to take a look at this YouTube video for a couple of workplace ethics scenarios. As we discussed, companies demonstrate a commitment to a code of ethics, in part through using ethical criteria when providing feedback for employee appraisals. For instance, employees may be rewarded for effectively collaborating with a multicultural or global team. Even something as simple as working at a time that is reasonable for a global team is an effort to make the group more effective and allow consensus building and decision-making activities. With SOX, C-level executives now must accept personal accountability for published reports. A company with a good code of ethics will encourage employees to accept personal accountability for successes and failures. Companies should adopt a culture that rewards those who accept accountability even at great personal cost. Code of ethics should also emphasize the importance of developing employees at all levels of the organization. Professional development includes training not only on ethics, but on changing job responsibilities and marketable skill sets. Finally, employees should be rewarded when they operate honestly and ethically with all levels of the supply chain, including customers and suppliers. You can take an entire semester and/or write a thesis on how to resolve some difficult ethical dilemmas, and maybe then you still aren't sure how to proceed in an ethical manner. When faced with ethical dilemmas, it is helpful to have foundational knowledge on the different ethical theories that may help form your ethical outcome. In this class, we will touch on 4 approaches to responding to ethical dilemmas. First is a virtue approach. With this approach, you consider your personal values and the values of your community to help in resolving ethical dilemmas. The virtue approach refers to traits such as honesty, kindness, patience, compassion, diligence, loyalty, fairness, and tolerance. With this approach, you ask yourself if what you plan to do reflects the kind of person you strive to be. Will it reflect positively on your company if it shows up on the front page of USA Today? Are you able to live with the outcome of the situation if it doesn't go as planned? With this approach, you're doing the right thing based on personal and other values. With the virtue approach, you try to do the right thing with the right person or people, to the right extent, at the right time, and in the right way. Although this is the objective, Aristotle considers achieving this goodness as rare, laudable, and noble. It's more important that we strive for virtue while understanding that attainment of the ideal is rarely accomplished. Another approach to resolving ethical dilemmas is the utilitarian approach. With this theory, you look at the situation and see which option or options produce the most benefit and the least harm. Thus, you evaluate the possible actions based on consequences. What are the net benefits and costs to all stakeholders at the individual level? Third is the fairness approach. This approach treats similar people in similar ways and only treats people unequally when they have differences that are relevant. For instance, someone with less experience in education could receive less pay than their more experienced and better educated manager. The fairness approach attempts to distribute good and harm in fair and equitable manners without discriminating unless there's a fair reason to treat different people in different ways. Thus, while direct reports may receive less than their experienced, well-educated employers, the differences in pay should be reasonable. Defining reasonable is one of the issues with this approach. We will talk about the reasonable person standard throughout this course, and you can think back to the approaches to the fairness approach to resolving ethical dilemmas. Finally, there's the common good approach. Here you look at what would advance your group or your tribe the most. The common good approach looks at ethical solutions that will help the organization make money, distribute health care, educate the public, support a political candidate, etc. As a member of a community or tribe, you pursue goals that are common and beneficial to your community within the framework of an ethical decision-making strategy. With this approach, you answer what kind of community do you want to become, and how will you achieve organizational goals within this framework. All ethical decision-making strategies have limitations, and it's important to think about these issues as we make our ethical decisions. The value approach does not provide a specific action plan to guide your actions. Further, virtue is difficult to define and depends on the situation that you encounter. How do we objectively define values? The utilitarian approach encourages you to produce the greatest benefit with the least harm. In practicality, it's often difficult to estimate and compare the benefits and cost of a specific situation. How much does it really cost if you decide to pursue an IT outsourcing project to India versus China versus Mexico versus rural sourcing in the U.S. versus in-house? Some of those costs and benefits are difficult to estimate. How much customer goodwill is lost, for instance, if you move production to Canada versus staying in the U.S. versus moving elsewhere? Similarly, how much will it cost to partner with someone in another country who perhaps does not speak your language or know your customs? The fairness approach also has limitations. No matter our situation, we all bring personal biases with us. We develop biases early in life, and they are reinforced over time. It's difficult to determine your own biases, and you cannot remove your bias from the situation. You attempt to recognize it and overcome it, but it's not an easy process. When you do make a decision, often flawed and biased people, just like you, may think you acted unfairly. With the common good approach, it's sometimes hard to reach a consensus on the best option available. Some may believe that available budgets should be spent on IT infrastructure development to bolster your company's scalability, while others may believe that investing in new mobile technology offers the best use of limited resources. Reaching a consensus between groups with different goals and different ways of solving ethical dilemmas may be difficult. And once a decision is made, one group often pays a higher cost than others. You do the best you can given your personal situation and the goals of your tribe. Ethical decision-making is one tool that helps you decide how to proceed given uncertain situations. Information technology offers several situations that may be considered ethical dilemmas. For instance, should a company monitor email and internet access at work? From the organization's perspective, you're using their technology or their electricity or their network connection or their desk when you complete a task. If it's my equipment or my Wi-Fi or my electricity, I have the right to use it myself or see who else might be using it and even what they are doing. Are you downloading in violation of copyright laws or watching videos that are inappropriate for the work environment? I need to know this to minimize my liability if cases are brought forward. I also need to know so that I can prevent it from happening, perhaps with filtering software, and/or terminate employees who violate this rule. The organization may then receive lowered premiums since the workforce is regularly trained, and its cost may be mitigated because they are monitored and tried to prevent inappropriate use of their technology. Unsolicited email presents another challenge for information technology leaders. Spam can take up an inordinate amount of time and space. No matter the time or space required, the person sending the spam is using your network without your permission and in ways that you didn't approve. Should you go after the spammer or simply have a filter to put as much spam as possible in the trash bin? Within the work environment, you are responsible for maintaining the security of the data and information you possess. That data includes employee health care records, sales figures, negative results obtained in studies, etc. Further, the organization has an obligation to its customers. It does not want someone to steal your identity through a backdoor in its technology. Thus, companies must provide reasonable protection to the data it owns or possesses. Plagiarism is another issue that is of concern to IT professionals. If others take wording directly from another source without attribution and put that information on your website, how are you going to get it removed? What do you do if infringing videos are posted on your website? The company is obligated to remove copyrighted material when it finds it, or when it receives a notice that the material needs to be removed by the copyright owner. IT professionals also must ensure that cookies and spyware are minimized and employee and customer data is not compromised. IT professionals need to make clear, concise, and ethical decisions regarding technology. Understanding the various ethical decision-making approaches may help technology leaders make objective decisions that benefit the tribe without harming others. A solid technical background along with business knowledge and combined with an established ethical framework will help make the right decisions for individuals and groups. Fostering an open environment where discussion of ethical dilemmas is encouraged and rewarded is one step toward improving ethics and IT. Clearly, ethical challenges abound for companies and individuals in today's rapidly changing technology-focused environment. Having a C-level executive like a corporate ethics officer demonstrates an organization's commitment to ethical decision-making. Managers who follow the rules and act with an understanding of the common good will encourage others to emulate ethical decision-making activities. Ethics should always be considered when making any decision, and multiple frameworks may be considered prior to reaching a final decision.